Welcome back. You're watching Commodity Champions. Chief Economist at Dun & Bradstreet, Arun Singh, now joins us with his sense on that space. Arun, hi. Thank you so much for your time. The interim budget had a lot of thrust on agriculture as the government was trying to address the agrarian crisis ahead of the elections. Now, with the main budget around the corner, do you think the budget would follow upon all of those reforms that we've already seen government pushing out?
So, if you see that in interim budget from 1st February to now, it's almost 3 to 4 months. And that budget was, in any case, we all know or anticipated that that was a sort of political budget, intended towards certain things, while some of the things government tried to address through, farm income support or some other stuff in terms of the agriculture allotment, agriculture expenditure, or some other rural scheme. They did that, but we have a restriction in the interim budget. It's supposed to be just for 3 months. It's basically just the another version of vote of thanks, vote on account, for example. That was the budget. Now government got into the full-fledged, and this time it has to be a much better than what we have seen from the first in the interim budget. Now, during from interim budget till date, we have seen most of the macroeconomic parameter, unfortunately, not supporting to the Indian growth story, especially your agriculture. Now, in February, your expectation about the monsoon was not very clear. It was still. It may be normal, it may not be normal, but now it's very clear that is delayed. It's not just delayed, it's also below normal. There could be a special distribution issue. There might be some of the states might have a scanty, some of the states might have a surplus, which means there will be a maximum impact on the productivity going forward. That's one biggest concern we have. So my expectation from the budget, of course, was, it has to be a full-fledged in the sense, it's not just from the farm support in terms of the income, also thinking about designing a appropriate marketing plan for the agriculture sectors, improving productivity of some of the distressed sectors, and then of course most important the insurance scheme. So I think there are some crops covered. I think it's a holistic approach required towards the insurance scheme, because I have seen that your farmers insured as well as the land insured in this it's not that great. In fact, it's declining. So there's some issues happening in spite of we had a drought last year and this year. So there's some concern that farmers or the state government not getting full benefit, or they're not availing full benefit. There has to be better coordination between state and center to address the rural distress, because there are a number of factors when last 5 years, starting from the lower monsoon to some of the bumper crop, and then lower realization in spite of the higher MSP, and there's some import. As a result, rural is really in the serious trouble, and I think government have realized that we might have seen that every day there's some thought process going on in terms of how we can revive, and that rural sector holds a major major share in that piece. So I think there could be many stuff, but these are the things I'm expecting from the government side.
Arun, also the rural growth has been an issue, as you pointed out yourself, and it has been for a while now. We've seen wage growth decline. We've seen infrastructure as a problem as well. We've seen employment also a big question mark. What would you like to see the government work on now? What do you think is a priority when it comes to rural growth?
So I think if you see, I think we are almost, can see that many years we are facing the same trouble in terms of every monsoon period. We basically depend on the rain god, on the monsoon. It's many years the same story. Well, there has been a allotment of, or maybe there has been huge expenditure increase in the irrigation sector, but something is not working. If you see 95% of our rural areas, in fact the agriculture output comes from the rural areas, and the 95% of the employment in the agriculture sector comes from the rural areas. And last 5 years, this could be the 6th consecutive year where you have the less than normal monsoon, which means last 5-6 years we are struggling. Your productivity is down. Last 1 year at 18-19 was -1%. That somehow we are meeting through import. So your availability of food grain does not come down. In fact, we had a bumper crop. As a result, your realization is going down. So there are basic need, there are basic problem we have seen in the farm sector. The one single most biggest issue we have seen, the productivity in the agriculture are not going up. As a result of that, that's basically the clear results of your monsoon dependency. Your kharif crop, a significant portion of your kharif crop or the land are covered either unirrigated or there's absolutely dependent on the monsoon. So last 5 years, unfortunately, we have not done improvement on that piece. That's the single most item I would suggest we need to improve, that agriculture than expenditure on the irrigation front. Because unless we do that, I think things are not going to improve. You talk about the marketing plan, you talk about the better realization, you talk about the managing export import, but things is basically your origin part is not that great. We need to make it sound and strong.
The other major concern, of course, has been the monsoon deficiency that we have seen in June. It has been quite dismal, though the IMD keeps telling us that as we go forward in July and August and September, it is going to be quite positive and we'll see a recovery. But how much of it is a concern right now, especially with the Kharif sowing also down in double digits?
See, I'll tell you, if you overall crop productivity, if you see, last 17-18, I mean, there was some bumper crop, and last 2 years on average, in fact, last 5 year average import of wheat, rice, pulses, and then cereals. If you see, this average growth is 11%. As a result of that, in spite of lower monsoon last 5 years, we had good availability of crop, and because of that, you might have seen that prices have not gone up. In spite of the fact that MSP gone up, the realization didn't appear because we had a good crop with stocks, in fact, 22% higher last average 2 years. That's one thing. Now, unfortunate event, what's happening? Last 18-19, you have a minus 1% productivity decline in terms of the food grain. This year, 12% sowing is down in terms of the Kharif crop. So you have a minus 1% productivity decline last year. This year, 12% already showing down in the Kharif crop. All will add up to your lower availability of the food crop, which means either government have to rely more on the import front, or we all have to bear the heat of higher prices. So that's the biggest concern.
Well, I take your point on that, but weak monsoon, lower farmer remuneration, higher buffer stock with the government and the government imports as well, and the constant interventions that government perhaps keeps doing in the space. Do you see all of that changing with the new budget?
So, we all basically acknowledge this fact. There is a serious distress in the farm sector. Basically, it's just the rural wages have not revived. That's one concern. If you take that part one side, the second side, we also have basically the food security concern. So, in case in any of the year your productivity is not going up, or maybe you have a lower productivity or lower production, agriculture production, given a number of reasons, it's government have to ensure that we get food. Basically, then they have to rely on the import, a number of things, which means your stock availability has to be intact to feed your mass. So that's one thing. That's basically where you get impacted in terms of the farm wages and the rural and the income, basically. That part we have to ensure that, enough things have been done. Unfortunately, not folding into the outcome in terms of the agriculture productivity. What basically, that will improve the bargaining power of the farmers, at least in-house. There we have to basically think about how to improve the productivity. It's not overnight process. It basically is a gradual process. Your dependency on the import has to come down. That basically one thing, because they also have to ensure your price realization is not, your pricing is not going up, which means there has to be more non-farm activity, provided by the government. You're moving some of the farm sector employment to other non-farm. I think, as a researcher, last 20 years, I'm talking the same thing. But unfortunately, something has to be, have a foolproof plan we need, because something is not working. We talk about non-farm activity, but that's not working last 20 years. There has been gradual changes we have seen, but that's not significant enough to help the rural sector. So one, basically you have to focus on the productivity of your own agriculture produce. Second, some of the employment has to be moved from agriculture sector to the other activity, non-farm, basically in order to, bring down the disguised unemployment in the agriculture sector. That's creating a problem, because when you have a lower people employed in your agriculture sector, even for the same produce, your productivity will shoot up. And then you have better realization for your own farm produce. So either you change your numerator or you change denominator, your ratio will improve.
Well, the other big buzzword is the water crisis, really, because when you look at the water reservoirs, out of 91, 11 are running dry in India. There is a 65% deficiency within these reservoirs as well. And while, of course, the government has been forcing or working on micro-irrigation, what else would you see the government focus on to ensure that there is no water crisis, one, and the big agriculture belt and the agrarian crisis, which we anyways have been dealing with, seems to be now getting even more agitated because of the water concerns?
I'm absolutely aligned with you. I think it's too late. When I say that this could be the sixth year where we have a less than normal monsoon, I think it's too late for all of us to act now. It's a scientific, it will be a scientific answer, how we basically, increase the moisture, how we basically talk about the reservoir increase, how we're talking about the new reservoir creation or linking of the river or something. There are various things we have discussed in the past. Now, setting up a Jal Ministry, that's a good initiative, but I think we are in 6th year. And you talk about, when talk about the various reservoirs, it's all lowest in the 10 years. I mean, it's all, most of the statistics if you see, whether talk about the water level, you talk about the moisture, I think it's lowest in the 10 years. That's one concern. I think it's too late, but still government have to act very fast to ensure that we get the water, because 70% of the population we're talking about dependent on your rural sector. In fact, 100% of the population depend on your water. Thus, in any case, has to be resolved. Now, various things, I think it's a scientific thing government have to work around, how they can increase that, the reservoirs and then stock in the reservoirs, basically. But then have to start acting fast. It's not about the planning, it's not about the coming up with the new schemes. Basically, the action required at this point of time.
All right, that is a big wish list then on the agriculture sector as well. Arun, thank you so much for your time. We'll let you go at that. And with that, it's a wrap up on this edition of Commodity Champions. Thank you for watching.